This is Aikorkem. At 4 years old, she's the youngest known victim of a deadly crackdown on nationwide protests in Kazakhstan 1 year ago. It became known as Bloody January. Since then, the authorities have ruthlessly crushed dissent, but Aikorkem's father says he will never stop demanding justice.
Оружейник жауап беру керек, воинский часть жауап беру керек, полностью бәрі жауап беру керек. Бірінші очередь атуға рұқсат берген, указание берген кісі. Ол біздің президентіміз Qasym-Zhomart Toqaev.
The protests began peacefully in western Kazakhstan on January the 2nd after a steep hike in fuel prices. But they quickly spread into unprecedented nationwide anti-government protests. In one town, a statue of Nursultan Nazarbayev, who had ruled Kazakhstan with an iron fist for 30 years, was toppled. These were the scenes in Almaty, Kazakhstan's largest city.
Сейчас до сих пор в городе слышны взрывы светошумовых гранат, слышны автоматные очереди. То есть полицейские работают в усиленном режиме. Как ты уже отметил, здание акимата сейчас во власти протестующих, оно горит. И я отмечу, что это здание акимата, оно относится к памятникам республиканского значения. И там сейчас происходит пожар. Что касается пожара в одном из офисов правящей партии Нуратан, то да, действительно такой факт был.
As Kazakh security forces struggled to regain control, Russia announced it was sending troops to shore up the regime, based on Toqaev's request. On January the 7th, he made this chilling address to the nation.
Правоохранительным органам и армии мною дан приказ открывать огонь на поражение без предупреждения.
Within hours, this order would have deadly effect. In a suburb of Almaty, the Medel-Khan family needed to stock up on supplies after days of chaos in the city. Their eldest son, 18-year-old Baurjan, drove into the city centre to find a store that was open. He took Aikorkem and 2 other siblings with him, while the parents stayed home with the baby. He said that when they arrived at this junction, soldiers opened fire.
Айналада тірі жан көрген жоқпын дейді. Тока алдыңғы жағымда мынау подземка бар ғой, акиматтың алдындағы. Сол төңіректен 3 жарқыраған шоқтарды көрдім дейді. И тартылған дауыстар, и мәшинеме бірдеңке тие басады дейді. Түсіндім, атып атқан деп. Сонымен айналып артқа қарай алысырақ қашам деген кезде мәшинені толық атқылаға берген ғой.
This is what the car looked like afterward. Meldekhan says he doesn't know who took his children to the hospital. Janelle, Aikorkem's 15-year-old sister, had 2 bullets in her lungs, plus other gunshot wounds. She survived, but Aikorkem died from a bullet to the head.
Өзіміз тапқан сол мәшинеден шыққан оқтары бар, қыздың денесінен шығарған оқтары бар.
Aikorkem was one of 238 victims identified by RFERL's Kazakh service, which created this website to record their lives and deaths. For some, like 42-year-old Almas Mukashev, there are photos. For others, such as 21-year-old Oljas Alimjanuli, there is sparse information. He was killed on January the 5th in Almaty. By January the 10th, Toqaev declared that order had been restored. But in the days and weeks that followed, the full horror of what had happened began to emerge. Videos showed security forces dragging people from hospitals. There were multiple reports of people being tortured in custody. like this man who said he was scorched with an iron. The police began exhuming the bodies of victims who were declared terrorists. Anxious relatives gathered outside detention centres. Over the following months, Toqaev moved to consolidate power. His predecessor Nazarbayev was sidelined, stripped of his powerful behind-the-scenes role as head of the country's Security Council. Members of his family also lost their positions of influence. Toqaev said the protests had been fueled by high-level corruption during the old system, and he announced a referendum on reforms to modernise the constitution. 3 days before the vote, this portrait of Aikorkem appeared on a wall in Almaty. Within hours, workers painted over it.
Самое ценное у меня отобрали. Отобрало государство, военные, полицейские, они все относятся к государству. Они у меня отобрали и хотят, чтобы я молчал. Нет, конечно, я не буду молчать.
Others would also not be silent. On the day of the referendum, these activists demanded the release of political prisoners and for Nazarbayev to be jailed. But the vote was mostly smooth, and the official results showed approval for Toqaev's reforms and for stripping Nazarbayev of his official status as El-Basi, or father of the nation. The crackdown on protesters also continued. More than 1,000 people were convicted on various charges, including hundreds found guilty of participating in mass riots. By contrast, just one soldier was convicted of killing a protester. Aikorkem's case is one of many that have hit a dead end.
Бұлардың айтса міне, қандай адамдар бар екен, сол күні болғанын білеміз, кім атқанын білмейміз. Потому что қай автомат кімде болғанын білмейміз. Потому что ол запись жоғалып қалған.
In November, there were again small protests like this one, demanding genuinely free and fair elections. They came as Kazakhs went to the polls in a new election that cemented Toqaev in power for another 7 years. Official results gave him 80% of the vote, though international observers said it lacked genuine competition. The other candidates were all obscure figures, largely unknown to the public. Kazakhstan marked Independence Day on December the 16th with a wreath laying at a monument to anti-Kremlin protesters killed by Soviet forces in 1986. But it was a low-key ceremony, lasting just 15 minutes, and the mayor of Almaty disappeared without speaking. Elsewhere in Almaty, police were heading off another attempt at protest, rounding up opposition activists. December the 16th was also the anniversary of a 2009 massacre in Zhanaozen, when police shot dead at least 16 protesting oil workers. Veteran human rights campaigner Galim Agalyov said the anniversaries pointed to parallels between the current authorities and the Soviet ones.
Они преемники этой власти, они идентичны, потому что почерк один и тот же. Желтоксан, Жанаузен, Кантарские события, это право на расстрел, это все их родовые черты, когда они не дают свободу людям, гражданам, и подавляют их силой, и принимают, вынуждены в крайних случаях принимать команду расстрелять людей. И они остаются за кадром, они безнаказаны.
Melda Khan insists his fight for justice will continue as the first anniversary of Aikorkem's death approaches. Her sister Janelle had surgery in Turkey, paid for by a fund that was created by Toqaev and largely financed by businessmen with government connections. Chanel is still recovering from her injuries.